Hey guys, recently I've had quite a few questions on an affordable 35mm lens for Leica M-mount. So in this video I thought I'd revisit the Voigtlander Nokton 35mm f1.4 Classic. I will cover the old version versus the new version. I'll mention the single coated versus multi-coated, and then stay with me until the end and I'll mention maybe a few other lenses which potentially I prefer to this lens. Let's jump into the video and I'll hopefully tell you everything you need to know about the Voigtlander 35 1.4. Hey guys, Matt here from MrLeica.com. So yes, if you saw my video back in, I think it was 2020, I did a period of 10 videos in 10 days, and one of the videos was the 35 1.4 Nokton versus the 40mm 1.4 Nokton. I've actually had my copy of the lens since early 2015, and I've used it extensively on originally the Leica M240, a little bit on the M8, and then more recently the Leica SL and the Leica CL. That said, it has been sitting catching dust for quite a few years. I tend not to choose this lens as my first 35mm, so it's quite nice to dust it off and see what it can do and remind myself of how the images will look. The original version of this lens has got really bad focus shift, or that's what many people reported. I use my lens, as it mentioned, on the Leica M240 digital, but also on film cameras like M2, like M6, like M4P, and I never really ever noticed focus shift. I think it's probably because I tended to shoot the lens wide open. In Europe we need all the lights we can get most of the time, and so if you shoot any lens wide open you're never going to notice the focus shift. So that's the first thing to kind of be aware of. Voigtlander then released the version 2 or Mark 2 of the same 35 1.4 to correct the focus shift. And although I don't own the Mark II version of the lens, from reading lots of reports, it does correct the focus shift almost 100%. It's slightly sharper with slightly more contrast in the center. However, the corners are slightly softer. Also, I think the purple fringing is improved on the Mark II versus the Mark I. If you're new to the word focus shift or the term focus shift, it's only really a problem on rangefinder cameras. So if you're buying this lens to adapt to any mirrorless camera, you can use the Mark I because the focus shift isn't going to be a problem if you're using an EVF type camera. One of the biggest pros of this lens is the size. It's a really compact size for a 35 1.4 aperture. The original that I've got weighs around 200 grams and the Mark II version weighs 108 to 9 grams. So that's 7 ounces versus I think 6.6 ounces. So pretty compact but equally quite a solid lens. It is all metal and glass like all Voigtlander M-mount lenses, or VM lenses as they call them. The lens does have the focus tab design, which is great if you're a, say, street photographer. I tend to prefer lenses with focus tabs. I did get to test the Leica Simlux 35 1.4, and that's got a really nice focus tab and kind of ergonomics. And it is sharper than this lens, but then it's a lot more money as well. The field size is 43mm, and you can get this lens in both multi-coated or single-coated. The main difference is single-coated will look more like a classic vintage lens with lower contrast and maybe more flare. The multi-coated, which is the lens I've got, will have better contrast and less flare. Talking of flare, let's get into the lens characteristics. If you point the lens at the light in certain conditions, you will get a red light ring of flare on your image, but that said, I never really use this lens with a hood, and the lens is not supplied with a hood. Sun stars, if you stop this lens down, you can get some really nice 10-point sun stars, but you do need to stop it down. On other Voigtlander lenses, say some of the Ultrons, the 35 1.7 in particular, 35 f2, they give you really nice sun stars even at like wider apertures. Vignetting, if you don't like heavy vignetting, this lens might not be for you. Very, very heavy vignetting at 1.4, which goes bit by bit, and it's gone by about f4. Sharpness. The sharpness of the version 1 lens is sharp enough to use wide open at 1.4, and I used it at 1.4 shooting film, which tends to be softer than digital. That said, the Mark II version is supposed to be slightly sharper than the Mark I if you want additional sharpness. In terms of contrast, with it being a classic lens design, it doesn't have the highest contrast of lenses. The Mark II is supposed to be a higher contrast, and compared to the Voigtlander Nokton 35 1.2, that is sharper with much higher contrast, giving a much more modern look. Bokeh from this lens can be called nervous in certain conditions, and you do have a hard edge to the bokeh balls. The bokeh from the version 1 lens is said to be slightly softer than the version 2 because of the lower contrast. It helps give a more softer kind of out of focus area. Okay, what about some more sample photos? So if you want a small 35mm for travel, the 35 Nokton 1.4 is a great option, although I probably would take the Ultron given a chance. These are photos shot in Lanzarote last week, a quick getaway with a model friend running buddy. And so these are photos just around close to where we were staying. This is the beach that we're swimming and running on in the mornings. As you can see, decent image quality, stop down, and not overly contrasty. And then the colours were good. You can see here, this is just with a preset to give them a bit more pop. Here's us trying to do some photos outside just after the midday sun under the trees. These were the CL, just because the CL was smaller to carry around if you just want like a more sociable camera. And then we didn't get a huge amount done in the daytime, so once the evening came, we shot a lot more inside. So these were shot in our balcony at the apartment, and I was using some LED lights. I'll do a full YouTube video on this because they're amazing lights. And then as you can see there, I balanced the light to match the sunset. So yeah, I'll put more on Flickr. So those are the photos. What did you think? Let me know in the comments. Do you like the lens? Do you not like the lens? For me, can I recommend this lens? If you'd asked me a few years ago, I probably would have said yes. But since owning quite a few 35 Voigtlander lenses, I've owned the 1.2, the 1.4, the 1.7, the f2 Ultron, and the 2.5 Scope. Of all those lenses, this lens kind of sits in the middle of everything. It's not the best any one area, and so I guess it could be called a good all-rounder, especially if you're using an M body. If you want something better for portraits, I would get the 35 1.2 Nokton. That's my favourite 35mm lens for portraits. And then if I want something smaller and lighter, I prefer to carry the 35 f2 Ultron. What about the price? This is a very popular lens and it does seem to hold its price really well. You can buy them new for £576 approximately, which is around $600 if you go to B&H. Or you can buy it used for around £500. If you want something even cheaper, and again if you're using an EVF camera, look at the 40mm 1.4. They're basically the same optics, but the 40mm is always cheaper because it's kind of the less favoured focal length. So in summary, if you're using an EVF camera, you'll be totally fine with the version 1 lens. If you're using a rangefinder camera and you stop down a lot, you might be better to get the version 2 lens. And if you don't need the f1.4 aperture, I still recommend the 35 f2 Ultron, which is smaller, lighter, and doesn't have the focus shift problems. If you enjoyed this video, please smash the like button. As always, a massive thanks to my awesome patrons. And to watch the 35 versus 40mm video, you can watch that video next.